Welcome to Your Brand Amplified, the podcast where we interview marketers, publicists, and brands to learn their stories, what makes them tick, and tips and tricks that make a difference. Steve Kidd, best-selling author, business coach, radio show host, author of 20 books, or you have 20 books published, several of them bestsellers?
21, and all of them are bestsellers, actually.
Okay, very prolific. Well, Steve, I'm in awe. Thank you for being here today.
Well, Anika, thanks so much for having me.
Of course. So let's unpack this a little bit. Before we get to all these books and your prolificness, where did you start? Did you start out wanting to be a business coach or radio show host? Were there other things you did along the way?
Well, I've been in business literally all my life. I started selling at 5. I was a sales manager by 19, started my own marketing company when I was 20. So, I guess, you could say I've always wanted to be a business person. When I was in my 20s, I actually was a musician, and I've written probably about 100 songs. So always a writer in one form or another would probably be a good way of putting it.
Nice. Yeah. So what was your first business when you were selling at the age of 5?
So my parents had actually bought some greeting cards and holiday napkins for my brothers, who are a little bit older than I am, to be able to sell to earn some spending money. Mm-hmm. They very quickly learned that they didn't really like sales and decided to have lawn mowing jobs. And being the bold 5-year-old that I was,
clearly.
I was like, can I do it? And they're like, I'm sure my mom's thinking was, okay, we'll let him go and he'll be bored in 5 minutes and be back. Instead, I came back with an empty bag and a pocket full of money. And, I've been in sales ever since.
Oh my gosh. So then what took you to, you said you started a marketing company when you were 20 or in your early 20s. You had your first, another big business when you were 19. Was there a specific area that you like to focus on, or was it just like you just love sales, you love marketing, and this is who you are?
Well, I learned very quickly, and this was across my 20s, that what I really love as far as in sales goes is I love both listening to customers as well as then what we would call a closer. I'm a little different than most in that I really just want to help the people find a solution for a product that works for them. But I really did love that part. But at 19, I was actually working for a Kirby company, and my sales were good enough that I actually was promoted to the sales manager for that particular office. And then after I did that for about a year, I had moved again back to the city where my then wife lived. And we started a firm and started doing marketing and sales of products, mostly to churches and radio stations. It was basically mostly all audio video equipment.
Oh, wow.
Because I was a musician. So that's, kind of the world I was in.
Yeah. Resonate with your story. I grew up in Kansas, and when I was in elementary school, I remember I wanted to buy games. We'd get those catalogs and stuff. And I was that kid who would go door to door with my catalog of candy and greeting cards and wrapping paper and different things. I wanted those prizes that were in the back of the catalog that I got, right? When I was 15, I cold called people out of the white pages to get them to get their carpets cleaned for a carpet cleaning company in Topeka, Kansas. Yeah. So I love the fact that you had this drive from an early age, and you just pursued things and you just kept going after them and found a way to weave in things that you already knew about music and to the sales aspect and then to the marketing.
Yeah.
Yeah. So you're a musician. Are you still performing? Are you still playing? What kind of music did you play? Can you tell us a little bit more about that aspect?
Well, so back in those days, I was actually the lead singer of a Christian rock band, and I still do sing. The top end of my register isn't quite where it was back then, but it was also the 80s. So you had to have a really high squeaky voice in order to be able to get away with some of the songs we sang back then. And then I worked in church as a worship leader for many years as well. And so now most of the singing that I do is just pretty much, sitting here at my computer. I don't do a lot of it out. I mean, every once in a while, if you went onto my Facebook page, there's a few times that I've just gone out and done Facebook Lives and sang some songs and stuff. But it's kind of more just a hobby that I do these days versus the job that I had when I was 20.
Right. And did you tour around the country, around the world, going to different churches and performing, or stadiums. Tell us about that experience and what it
Oh,
taught.
yeah. Yeah. So when I graduated from high school, literally the day after I graduated from high school, I left home and went and traveled with a singing group that's called the Continentals. They were in existence for about 45 years.
Wow.
They still have an international branch, but their local US branch doesn't exist anymore. But, we traveled the entirety of the United States. We went into France, what was then West Germany. Tells you how long ago it was, 1985. And we were also in Holland. So I've traveled, around the world. And then I also later on in life toured with a musician into a couple of different countries as well as around the world.
Mhm.
And then, of course, I've moved to a bunch of different cities and worked as worship leaders and different things like that. The band itself, we were pretty well a localized band. We lived in the city of Flint, Michigan, and we were right on the cusp of having a recording contract, but we also all had young families and small children. And it's probably best really that we didn't end up in a situation where we were touring, 250, 300 days out of the year with, little tiny babies. It's kind of contrary to what it was. But during that time, I also worked as a DJ. It was originally an adult contemporary Christian radio station, got bought out by a conglomeration of churches, and it was actually a Black gospel radio station. And I worked there for a couple of years as well.
Oh, wow. Very cool. So how did that all lead into deciding to switch your writing to books from songs, becoming a best-selling author, and doing everything that you do today?
And I've been in internet space for forever. I mean, literally before the word the internet existed. So I've been writing copy and sales pitches and things like that, different forms of writing throughout the entirety of my life. And I've always kind of had stories that have, from even a young age that were kind of rambling around in my head. First, my second youngest daughter and my then wife, they actually were big fans. If you remember the movie Twilight, they were huge fans of the movie Twilight. And we happened to live in a town called St. Helens, which what was the filming location for Port Angeles in the movie Twilight. In fact, our shop that we had was next door to the alley. Those of you that are Twilight fans know exactly what I'm talking about. And everybody else is like, what are you talking about? Our building actually was literally, the alley ran next to our building. So next time you're watching Twilight, you can be like, I know Steve. He was actually literally walking down that aisle every time to the parking lot. And during that time, they visited all of the filming locations and they blogged about it. I helped them turn that blog into a book, and then we marketed that book to the #1 best-selling movie-related travel guide on Amazon at the time. And, it still sells. It's interesting because, 1 or 2 copies of it every month will still sell of the book. And that's kind of cool. But that was where we learned just how powerful being a bestseller is. Literally, best-selling author is the #1 influencer credential. It's more powerful than saying you're a medical doctor. In fact, my medical doctors are the ones that tell me that. And so really for my book journey, as I had done many times, I was writing a free opt-in for your website, give me your email address and I'll give you this little giveaway. Those are supposed to be short, a couple pages, usually giving them War and Peace, right? 110 Word document pages. Later, I had finished off everything that was just kind of coming out of me. And I had a mentor of mine, Dr. John LaJoy, who came in and wrote the foreword and kind of helped me with the process of putting that. And then I went back and I actually re-released it because it was called 10 Things. And I re-released each of the 10 things as their own standalone book because they really are standalone topics. And so that was the beginning of it. That's the first 10, 11 books because I made every one of those a bestseller. And then it's just kind of gone from there. I have a few nonfiction books that I've written. I did one, I don't know if we can quite call it a children's book. It's comic strip style, but some of the humor it's not graphic by any means, but it's kind of, you have to understand things that are going on in the adult world in order to really get what the joke's about. I make a joke about, what more can I do about COVID kind of a thing. And so, kind of all across the board. My 21st book actually was called Playing Hit It and Quit It with Jesus. And it's about learning to be the bride of Christ. And then my 20th book, as well as the 4 before that, are all about writing and making your book a bestseller and marketing and those kind of things.
Oh, nice. Let's talk about that. There are so many companies who will say, we can make you a best-selling author. And I'm in marketing, so I get approached all the time. Hey, we can help your clients write books. I know there's so many different categories. There are people who ghostwrite. There are companies that tell you how to self-publish. Then there are other people who say, no, you need to do a hybrid or get a publisher. So can you break this down a little bit? Like with all of your experience and all of your different books, what do you think is the best process for people when they have that? Because everybody has an idea. I don't know one single person who doesn't have at least one book idea within them, but knowing how to start that process and then where to go. And with all these different options out there, how do you figure out what's best for you?
So in the modern world, really, unless you have a massive following, and I'm talking like Tony Robbins, Oprah, Beyonce level of following, going the route of traditional publishing is really not a good idea. I mean, I'm not even sure really if you're at that level, because, we participated in some of the marketing of Lisa Nichols' book, Abundance Now. And even at that, I mean, she had as a goal of being a New York Times bestseller, which is why she did that. But the truth of the matter is that publishers want to own your content. And if you are doing it for part of your business, what that means is you can't create a program. You can't create a course. You're really technically not supposed to do speaking without permission because the publisher owns that content.
Okay.
That's the contract you sign. And then, of course, if you're talking nonfiction, that's the reason why there's so many really cool books out there that you've read. And you're like, why isn't this a movie? It's because the publisher didn't get the deal they wanted on the book.
Okay.
And then when you look at hybrid publishers, they are really well intended. And most of them, what I'm going to call being helpfulness, I don't think there's any ill intent, but most of them, what they're going to do is take an email address that they own the email, and they're going to log into that email address and upload your book into their platform. And what that means from Amazon's standpoint, I am exclusively talking about Amazon because Amazon sells in the high 90% of all books that are sold in the whole world. So it's not that you can't be on Barnes & Noble and all the other places, but, Amazon is where people are going to buy books, So, I really focus on that these days.
Okay.
And the problem with a hybrid publisher using their email address is they're who has the contractual relationship with Amazon.
Got it.
Amazon's putting money in their bank account. They know them. Author, it's just a form field, with the exception of extremely popular names. Like if you said your name was Oprah Winfrey, they're going to make you prove it. You can't just put that out as your pen name.
Yeah.
But you can make up a pen name and put it in the form field, and Amazon doesn't care because their contractual relationship is with the owner of that email address and the bank account information that was entered that they pay.
Okay.
So that again means that really, you don't really own your book.
Yeah.
Because if that company goes out of business, you have to prove to Amazon, and sometimes it works and sometimes it doesn't, that's your book and that you're the person who actually authored that book. And so that's where we then get into the world of self-publishing. When it comes to just about all the bestseller programs that I know of, pretty much everybody is using some morphed version of the thing I've been doing since 2007. Now, there's a whole lot of different nuances to it that people have added in, and we could spend the next hour talking about, some of the things that they think are a good idea that probably aren't, but we won't go to that rabbit trail. But the thing about it is that number one, you want to own the rights and the royalties to your book.
Okay.
But number two is, in order to rank, to be a bestseller on Amazon, it's really more about SEO, meaning Amazon's a search engine of people looking to buy things, and you need to optimize for the search engine that is Amazon, the different settings. And you need to understand both how that works just in general SEO, but also then what are the things that the reader that you're trying to reach is actually searching for, and put the keywords, categories, descriptions that does that.
Okay.
That's where a company like mine, there's a couple others. Most of them are in that hybrid space and they use their own email address versus the clients. But that's where I step in, is I help the person own their content. And then I work as a service to help them get all of those little tweaks set up so that it makes the difference. Because when your book is set up right, number one, anytime you drive traffic, it's going to show up in the overall ranking of your book. But number two, as I wrote in my 20th book, bestseller is the beginning. Bestseller is really a day one marketing campaign. That's where your book should launch if you're set up properly.
Okay. This is a masterclass in books. So thank you. I'm loving getting all this information from you, because these are questions that I have had as well. And if I'm trying to educate a client who's a PR client of mine on which way they're going to navigate if they have a book idea, I need to know this stuff, right? So I love that you said, so bestseller is really a day one launch tactic. It is just one part of it. It's not the end game. There's a lot that you do after you reach that bestseller status. And because Amazon is so important to book sales, you do hear about, the New York Times bestseller list. How do you get on that and all that stuff? But is that really not as important these days?
Yeah. So number one, the Amazon bestseller list is the only one that I know of that is truly statistically driven.
Okay.
Meaning that if your book is at number 2 and another book's at number 3, that means that your book sold more copies than the book at number 3. Now, the downside to that is Amazon's list updates hourly versus every month or every week or every 6 months or every year. So it is a much more volatile list. Well, it has the potential of being a much more volatile list. And there are other nuances in the algorithm than just the purely this book sold more than that book. But at its core, that's what the program that is the website Amazon is they want to give you a bestseller list that is, when you look at a bestseller list, it's like, these are the books that are selling the best right now, this minute. And I say this minute, they're actually about 8 to 12 hours behind. So if you're listening right now and it happens to be 4 o'clock where I am, you're looking at a reflection of 4 a.m. to 10 a.m. is the sales from that hour is approximately what you're saying. There's some nuances to that. We don't have to go into the technology of Amazon. So that's the thing. I mean, really, when we look at bestseller, the best way to think about it is like graduating from medical school for a business person. So when you graduate from medical school, what that really means is that you've shown a writing test-related knowledge of anatomy and physiology. You've done some work with some scalpels and things like that, but most of it's really brain work. It's regurgitated knowledge type of work with some very, very basic skills so that when they put you in as an intern, you can begin to start doing things. But you really don't learn to be a doctor until you go to your internship, which is after you've graduated medical school. The same thing is really true when it comes to your book. You make the book a bestseller. That's your third party, Amazon, saying this is legitimately somebody who has done the work to be able to reach that level. And that's then what you build that on is this person's a bestseller. And the reason why that's important, being Amazon versus New York Times, is New York Times is an editorial, meaning that going back to Lisa Nichols' book Abundance Now, Lisa Nichols' book should have been somewhere between number 3 and number 7, depending on the day you're looking at it, on the New York Times bestseller list. She was not on it at all. 2 reasons. Number one is that HarperCollins, her publisher, put her in totally wrong categories and in a category that Oprah was promoting a book of Brene Brown's. So Lisa was never going to be number 1 in that category. But secondarily, she wasn't listed on New York Times bestseller list because she has a very strong marketing engine that directly goes to her listener base. And she at the time also was on the Steve Harvey show and, was offering the book available for sale there. New York Times is really just a reflection of Walmart or other big box retailers made large purchases, even though her book went into 3rd reprint faster than any book in HarperCollins history has ever. I mean, it's like a 150-year-old company, and she sold into the 3rd reprinting faster than anybody ever had. She didn't get listed there because it wasn't the way that New York Times does that.
Wow.
As well as there's a whole lot of editorial nature of that. So if you want to be a bestseller, you want to do it based on what you actually did and not any of the other behind the scenes kind of things. Or, like there's some of the other lists that it's really just a matter of if you spend enough money, you're essentially buying an ad in that magazine or paper.
Interesting. I never knew any of that. So you're really pulling back the curtains here, Steve. I love this. Thank you. So you self-publish, you get to bestseller on Amazon. What's next?
So you really want to have a strategy and a plan before so that you're doing it. It may be creating a course that you're going to sell. It may be being a public speaker. I mean, I even had one guy who his whole purpose, his marketing strategy was he wanted to be more valuable at the job and he wanted to get a C-level position at the company that he worked for. It makes it very good for a corporation like that to be able to say, our chief marketing officer happens to be the international best-selling author of this highly regarded book on marketing. That's great for you. And, the same thing's true if you're a keynote speaker. Somebody's marketing, you're a publicist is one of the things you said you do. When you can say our keynote speaker is the best-selling author of the book, so that is the foundation that you build, whatever that thing you're going to do is on. And then we begin doing the work of creating the community around that and the coursework and the other marketing strategies that you build upon that.
Mm-hmm. I know I'm also a college professor, and that's something that's very highly regarded if you are published. Even if you're like me, I'm just an adjunct professor, so I teach a couple classes a semester. But I hear other professors who are full-time tell me they really want us to be published. They really want us to have books published. They really want us to show up in prominent publications with quotes and things like that. So what you're really saying is it really helps you establish, not just establish, but firmly root yourself as the thought leader and the expert in the area that you're writing about.
Absolutely. Seth Godin, I think, said it best. He said, if you're writing your book to make money, then don't. But if you want to make money, you absolutely need to have a book. And while you're writing the book, let's face it, if you need a plumber, you want the guy who wrote the book on it, not just somebody who happens to, have an ad in, on Google now. I won't say the Yellow Pages because I don't think anybody uses that anymore.
Yeah. So successfully, all of your books are bestsellers. And
yes. And in fact, the almost 5,000 clients that I've worked with now, I have 100% success rate, making people best-selling authors.
So when did you turn from writing books to becoming a coach and helping other people and pulling out the best of them to write their books?
It was actually the other way around.
Oh.
So I've been a coach. I was even in that sales management position at 19. I was coaching people. I mean, we didn't call it coaching back then, mentoring, training, different things like that. But, I've been doing that my entire adult life.
Wow.
So, I continued to do that. And then as I began to write the books and as the marketing company started in 1987, so in 2007, when we began to do books, that very quickly actually took over the majority of what we do. I mean, it's not that we're not still technically a full-scale marketing company, but we basically just work with authors.
Yeah.
As far as the specifically helping people specifically write their books, I do that via interview. And that was one of those really cool, a friend of mine calls them Godsidences, magical moments, if you will, where I was just talking to a person on a Zoom call, helping them kind of speak out the thoughts of what they had for it. And I was taking notes at that particular time. And I said, hey, do you want to hear what your book sounds like? And I actually was able to weave the notes that I had taken into a full story for them.
Wow.
And I do still actually have that program. That's my extremely higher level program because, that's, like you said, it's nearly magical. You got to charge a lot for those things that are things you can't teach other people to do.
Yeah.
And then I have my basic system where, a person could either just do it themselves or interview themselves, or, I can interview them and then it goes to a content development person versus me actually weaving it on the spot for them. But that's kind of where that all began to come together is, between that. And I've had my radio show for 8 years now in just interviewing people and getting them to spill their guts, if you will, on my radio show. And that's kind of where it all kind of synergized together.
Yeah. Storytelling.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. The art of storytelling. Wow. So somebody can go onto your website and they can see all the different things you offer. And then you have training modules and things like that. And you just really walk them through the whole process.
Yeah. I mean, thrivingbestsellers.com is my website. It outlines for you the done for you, done with you, taught to you, or even the marketing you. Marketing you being you already have a book, but it's not a bestseller or it's not ranked as high as you want it to. In most of those cases, we're going to move you from giving you the basic information on it to just let's get on a Zoom call and let's talk about what you specifically need.
Nice. Yeah, I do PR. I work with authors sometimes, but I am not a specialist at that. And so if somebody comes to me and says, make me the #1 best-selling author, that's not my jam. I don't have those tactics and techniques and strategies to do that. I can get them interviews. I can get them on podcasts. I can get them published with articles about being an author or about their subject matter expertise, right? But that's a nuance that's different than getting them to that bestseller list.
Right.
Yeah. So would you be willing to share? Obviously, we know you're a bestseller and you've had 100% success rate. I'd love to hear a story or two of clients who came to you. They knew they had a book inside them, but they didn't really know what it was, what story they wanted to tell. And then they got to bestseller with you and what happened next?
Oh, so many fun stories. So Matt actually, the day we did his interview, He spent about the first 20 minutes trying to talk me out of doing his interview that day.
What?
He was like, no, I'm not ready. Let's put this up. And I'm like, well, let's just talk, let's turn on the recording. If we don't get anything that we want, we don't have to keep it. And his book, from that conversation, that was one of those where I did that weaving the book together right there live for him. And then we, did the continuing development of it after that. So that was a really fun one, because like I said, he literally went from that self-doubt, who am I kind of a state to, over the course of about a 2-hour conversation, he had written a book.
Oh my God. Yeah.
And on the flip side to that, Errol Abramson, the only billionaire that I've ever actually known personally, a really, really cool guy, he had written out his entirety of his life story. And it was one of those, like we all do, where he had pretty well regurgitated everything that had happened in the first 68 or 70 years of his life. Everything from stories about baseball games that he liked to things in his business. And we helped him winnow that down. It still is a relatively long book. I think it's almost 400 pages. But you're also talking about a multi-billionaire who's started 47 companies and never had a failure. Every single one of them sold for more than $1 million, with several of them selling for more than $1 billion when he exited out of them. And his book's called You Can Too. And it's literally his whole heart and soul behind it was just, hey, let me share with people how I was a 16-year-old kid eating out of dumpsters because I was homeless, to being a man who now, at the end of his life, he owned 3 companies that were all multi-billion-dollar companies. And teach people how to be able to do that. So that was really cool. I'll give you one more. We actually had one of our authors who had a C-suite job at her company, very, very well regarded. And she really wasn't fulfilled with that. She had kids at home. She had other things that she wanted out of her life, and not just, the daily grind of being, especially a C-suite level corporate. And so she quit her job. We put together a program with her that started, of course, with her book, and she made $100,000 her first year. And she even, went so far as to say that in the first 90 days of working with us, that she learned more with the process that we did than some of the extremely high end. And I'm talking like $50,000, $100,000 program coaches that she had invested money in. So that's just a few of them.
That's so fun, though. I mean, it has to be very motivating to get to see those aha moments and see changing people's lives through having them share their stories.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. I love bringing people out to the world, because that nearly 5,000 people now, that equates to several million people who have read their books and their lives have been impacted in, greatly, or, whatever level.
Mm-hmm. Now, what is a good book length? Because you mentioned that Errol's book was very lengthy. You said 400 something pages. Is there a good book length for people to get to?
Yeah, actually, Amazon, because they sell books, they actually did the research on it. And what they found is if your book is 100 print pages or less, so that's print pages, that's not a Word document. I'll give you an idea. A Word document, you're going to have about 4 to 6 pages out of each 8.5 by 11 single-spaced page. Okay. So 100 or less print pages, more than 60% of the people that get that book will read it and finish the book.
Really?
If it goes between 101 and 200, that drops to around 20%.
Wow.
If the book goes over 200 pages, it's actually less than 3% of people that ever finish the book. And now think about, if you have a bookshelf like I do, think about all those books on your shelf that you've started but never finished, or you read and got what you wanted out of it, and then, that was all you needed.
Wow. Yeah, I have seen a lot of people write short form books, and I've always wondered, is that the way to go? So you just said, yes, it is. And my next question is about audibles and, listening to books, because a lot of times I find these days I'm listening to books when after I drop my daughter off at school, or when I'm on my way to pick her up from school or take her to her activities. That's my quiet time. That's my downtime when I actually just enjoy time to myself and listen to a story. So do you have a process for that? Or do you recommend that after somebody gets their book on the bestseller list on Amazon, then they look at Audible and they look at other platforms?
Absolutely. So currently it's almost exactly a third.
Oh.
A third of them want ebook, a third of them want print, a third of them want audio.
Okay.
Audio is rising the quickest.
Mhm.
but it's still pretty close to that. That again, though, is also where that short form really comes in. So if you take your typical 350 page book, story or fiction or nonfiction, doesn't really make much of a difference. Typically, when you're going to get that Audible audiobook, you're going to be somewhere in the 15 to 18 hours is what it's going to tell you. Now, often a lot of us listen to, especially if it's business related books, we'll listen to it at double speed or, close to that, because there's a lot of the readers that speak very well and articulated, especially in the morning when you're driving. You need a little bit more hyped energy so that you don't fall asleep to the story. But even if you double speed an 18-hour book, that's 9 hours.
Yeah, that's a lot of time.
I forget. I saw the statistic that it's like something like 30 to 45 minutes is the average commute. Some people have longer, some people have shorter. But if in that 30 minutes, you could listen to a book that's following the concept of take a point, make it really clear, and give the people a clear action from that, so that as you pull up into the parking lot at your work or back home, if you work from home or whatever that might be, you have the person telling you, here's something you can do right now. We just finished this particular point, this particular book. Stop the recording because we're done. Do this thing right now. And so you can literally get out of your car, and whether it be, an affirmation that you're doing or it be a journaling thing that you're doing, I mean, you can literally up-level your life in that 30, 45-minute drive versus, 18 hours. I mean, how many days is that? That's more than a month.
Yeah.
Just to be able to get through the one book, to get to the, quote unquote, one point of that one book.
Right. Wow. You've shared some really amazing information today. I think there's so much actionable stuff that I'm hearing and things that I'm now like, okay, what do I need to consider for that book idea that I have, or those 5 ideas that I have? So I really appreciate it. Is there anything else that you'd like to share about going on your journey and starting your journey of becoming an author?
Well, the number one thing I want to make sure everybody hears, pull over to the side of the road if you're listening to it in the car. Maybe not. It depends on how safe that is. All right. But really pay attention to this for a minute, because I want you to really hear somebody is waiting on you. The message that you have, there is somebody who is struggling with that very thing. And it's usually something that's so easy for us that it may not even be the book you're contemplating doing, because you figure, with as easy as this particular thing is for me, everybody must know how to do that. And yet there are people who may literally be in front of Google right now crying, typing in, why can't I find the solution for this? I always tell the story, if I can take an extra minute and tell a story here, of a lady who was literally had a post-traumatic event based around doing dishes. Okay. Now, you don't normally think of dishes being a PTSD event, but because of some things that happened in her childhood, doing dishes was that extreme of a trigger for her.
Wow.
And so just walking into the kitchen and seeing there were dishes in the sink put her in a really bad state. And she went to a person who helped her develop a process that turned doing the dishes into her sanctuary time. She put on headphones and had a certain group of songs that she always listened to that really fed her soul. She got higher end, more expensive dish soap. And I'm not recommending that everybody go get expensive dish soap, but she did it specifically because of the specific fragrance of that. She had a couple of scented candles that she lit with it. It became this whole ritual that the lady in her book, and then in a coaching program along with that, helped her be able to develop. She went from being triggered by even just seeing the dishes needed to be done to looking forward to and having the sanctuary time of her day being that doing the dishes. It's really crazy when you start talking about doing dishes. It's like everybody knows how to do dishes. I mean, everybody at least knows how to put it in the dishwasher. And yet there are people who really, really don't. And for that person in need, that's literally water to a person dying of thirst in the desert. So somebody's waiting on you. The time to do your book is right now. You'll have more, you'll do more, and you'll probably get addicted like I am to writing books and having more of them. But that thing, it needs to go out, and it needs to come out today. And it doesn't have to be an arduous process. We can actually do your book in as little as 30 to 90 days. From now, you could be a best-selling author.
That's amazing. Thank you so much for sharing all of this. I know we're going to list a couple resources in the show notes. I want to put your author page from Amazon so that all of us can go look at your books. And we had thrivingbestsellers.com.
thrivingbestsellers.com is my main website.
And then you also have ongoingwealthguide.com.
So free gift for everybody at ongoingwealthguide.com. It's a 5-step program so that you can create abundance in your life. Meaning that regardless of when you go to your online banking, it says the bank account is, you have a process to be able to generate abundance in your own life. Along with that, there's actually the capability for you to get my 20th best-selling book, Bestsellers Only the Beginning, for free.
Wow.
And when you get to the thank you page, you can actually sign up for a free 15-minute consultation with me, and we can talk about anything that I can do to help you with.
Amazing. Thank you so much for offering all of your gifts to our listeners today.
Yeah, absolutely.
Really appreciate it. And lastly, do you have a favorite quote, family motto, mantra, Bible verse that you would want to share with us today? Something that helps drive you?
Well, yes. And I'm trying to narrow it down to just one. I'm going to actually combine 2 Bible verses, and I'm going to make people have to look it up themselves. So there's a Bible verse that says, God will do exceedingly abundantly above all that you can ask or even think. I'll give you a hint. It's in Ephesians chapter 3. You can find the verse. So I want you to think about the concept of exceedingly abundantly all that you can ask or even think. Because a lot of us have some pretty good imaginations, and it's above that. All right. So that we can do the simple process. There's another Bible verse that says, rejoice while it's called today. And I always tell people, let's maximize, be the best us that we can be today. Yesterday's gone. Tomorrow's on its way, but it's not here yet. Today is the day that we have. How can you be the best you that you can be today? Fantastic.
Thank you so much. I really appreciate you sharing so much knowledge with our audience. I know the audience appreciates it too. And I will be back in another few days with another amazing expert. Make sure to check out the show notes so that you can see all of Steve's resources. I will also have to put your radio show. Steve, I'm going to ask you for that link so I can drop that in the show notes too, if people can listen to it, maybe through the interwebs or however. And with that, have a beautiful day. Want more? Check out amplifywithannika.com or follow me on socials at amplifywithannika.